Welcome to Grid Machine DNA. This morning, I'm joined by Brian Smith, husband, father, incredible athlete. We went to high school together, and he's also one of the United States' greatest high school football coaches. What he does for students today in a predominantly low-income African-American community is powerful. What he's done in his life is powerful. And I hope that today it serves as an example for us to think like Brian, to act like Brian, take action, improve yourself, and do great things in America. Brian, welcome to Grit Machine DNA.
Man, it's an honor to be here. I really appreciate you guys bringing me on the Grit DNA machine, and can't wait to tell a great stories.
Well, thanks, Brian. I'm going to call you coach from now on. You earned it. That's how I follow you. But I do remember you as Brian growing up together. So, Brian, look, we like to start these conversations right off. And I'm just going to dive right in and ask, who are you?
Well, I'm a guy that grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts, in a housing project, Marion Gardens. And that helped shape my life, helped shape a lot of my ideals, a lot of my future plans. Always wanted to find a way to succeed and move on. And the Marion Gardens was a huge part of that. And so was Lynn, Massachusetts. So that's built me into the guy that I am. I'm a man of faith, like you said, a family person. I'm a coach, an administrator. I'm working on a doctorate degree as we speak. So I'm a guy who now, come May, will have two upper level graduate degrees, a master's degree, as well as a educational specialist degree that qualifies me to be a superintendent of schools if I need to be. Wow. So those things are, not normal for people who grew up where we grew up. And it's part of who I am. It's my character. Again, I believe in just being a person of faith and character and family. And that's so important to me.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I'm going to go dig a little bit because I want to give people perspective while we're having this conversation so they can understand, you and why we're having this conversation. So in my book, American Familia, I talk about where we grew up, Lynn, Massachusetts. Could you describe Lynn when you were growing up so people just have a little context?
Well, we were, and I hate the moniker, and I didn't like it growing up that people always kind of picked on Lynn, but we were known as Sin City, and there was, a lot of grime, a lot of toughness, a lot of heartbreak around us. The 80s were tough in Lynn. I was born in 1977, so we had to go through the whole drug pandemic of Lynn from the 80s to when we graduated high school, and there was lots of crime, lots of, everything going on around us that we could see. I tell my kids all the time, especially the ones who stray off, I've been next to real gangsters. I mean, so, yep. If you want that life, I can tell you all about it. But obviously we don't want that for our children. We don't want that for anybody we come into contact with. But Lynn was tough. But at the same time, that toughness breeds in you, and it makes you a stronger person. And it helps you to see what you truly want in life.
There's no question. It clearly defined who we are in part. So, Coach, let's dig in a little bit into the past, and then we'll come back full circle to what you do today. So one incredible impact and moment in my life, I think I was a junior and you were a freshman. I visited your house, and it was off Western Avenue, a tough area of Lynn.
Yeah. Arlington Street.
What's that?
It was on Arlington Street.
That's right, Arlington.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I opened up your refrigerator, and now mind you, my parents worked really hard. We weren't of good means. We had, pretty much working class. My mother and father worked really hard, couple jobs, et cetera, to make sure that we had food on the table. But in our culture, it was really important for the parents to provide for the kids. That was just really fundamental, and they delivered on that. And our fridge was always full of food. I'll never forget that. We didn't have anything materialistic, but we had food. And so I remember opening your refrigerator when I visit your house, and it was almost empty. It was literally a pack of hot dogs, milk, and water. There was, I think, a can of with cheese whiz or something, but it was, I mean, literally that was it. And I remember, and I think ketchup. And I remember going home after we hung out, um, thinking the whole way, like, how does that incredible athlete go to school every day, excel on the field, because you were a remarkable athlete even as a freshman. And I thought to myself, man, I'm tough as nails, but I have food on the table. I have plenty of food that I can always like check in my fridge and get, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, how did that early life and your parents, like, what was that like? Because for me, it just made an impression on me. And to have what you do today, there must have been, let me do this, describe those circumstances and how that shaped your upbringing and who you are today.
Right. Well, my parents split, as you know, when we were in the fourth grade. That's when we were living in the Marion Gardens. And so then we had to actually move out of the Gardens, which was a hard time on us. All our friends, family, everybody lived close to there. So we bounced around then, like a typical divorced family does, from house to house. Probably went to 5 different houses in 5 years. And finally settled on Arlington Street, which wasn't the nicest of neighborhoods now looking back.
Yep.
And, you only know at that time your experiences around you.
Yeah.
So at that time, we weren't yet traveling out of the city. We were mainly city centric. So all our friends that we went to, with the exception of a few, opened their fridge, same thing. So we didn't know we were any less privileged than anybody else.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we knew, hey, we got to go out and get it. My mom worked 2 jobs.
Yep.
She was never home hardly because of those 2 jobs, trying to just pay the rent. I mean, that's it. She was just trying to pay the rent, never mind. Because we got, at that time, no help from our dad. Bless his soul. I don't hold any ill will towards that. But that time we didn't get hardly any help from him. So my mom, it was all on her shoulders, and we knew that. So, that shapes you up too, to like, hey, it's time to be a man. Even though I'm in the 9th grade, I got to man up. I can't let my mom suffer. I can't let my family suffer and make bad decisions at the same time. I need to find a way out of this. I need to, do whatever I can to improve my situation daily. And so every day you wake up, you need to be doing something to better yourself from the day before. And that's the mentality that I had. I had perfect attendance in high school. A lot of people don't know that. So I loved going to school. One of the main reasons was our lunch, and I got to thank them because they're a big part of my success story, but our cafeteria staff at Lynn Classical High School was the best in the nation. Yes. Anytime I wanted more food, they gave it to me. They didn't charge me, and I know that's probably illegal, but they knew I was a good person. Good people know good people. That's what I always tell people. Good people know good people. So if you're a good person, you treat people the right way, no matter what status they're at, whether they're a janitor, whether they're a cafeteria person. If you love those people and you treat them how they should be treated, they're going to treat you right. And I found that out at an early age, and it helped me because, again, they took care of me, man. A big part of my meal each day came from that cafeteria. So you load up then, and then at nighttime you go searching. We would bounce from house to house to house and see which mom had cooked that night or had food left over in the fridge, and we'd all raid each other's fridges. So you just kind of scavenge. We were scavengers, and you had to do that to survive. But again, all that builds into what makes you who you are.
Yeah, Brian, I want to touch on two pieces here. Here you are at a young age, in a community that was really diverse. I mean, we were at the time, Lynn is now over majority, quote unquote, minority city, Hispanics, Blacks, Asians, et cetera. At the time, it was about 40%. But in where we lived, low income areas, it was predominantly minorities. And so here you were in a sea wave of low income kids that look like us, live like us, all modest means, low income means, and you're noticing what's around you. You had perspective and you had a self-awareness and understanding that that's not what you wanted. Could you talk a little bit about that? How did you develop?
Yeah, and I'm a quote famous rapper on this. Jay-Z once said, "I don't care if you have to sweep a broom. I don't care if you have to rap bars. I don't care if you have to dribble balls. Find a way out." Yeah. And that's true. Like, you want to find a way out because you knew that's not what you want for your life. And I was lucky enough to have great leadership above me. And I remember vividly, one of our great friends one night, I stayed out a little too late one night doing the wrong thing. And I got to school the next day and Rob Jones threw me up against a locker and said, "Dude, what are you doing? You're too talented for that. You can't be staying out all times a night. What nothing's good's going to come from that." Never did it again. I learned my lesson that day, and thank God for Rob Jones. And Rob Jones remembers that day exactly. And it was, I believe, we're on the second or third floor of Lynn Classical where my locker was. And he jacked me up, and I needed it. I tell my kids all the time these days that type of leadership's kind of missing. Yeah. A lot of times, a lot of people are afraid of leadership now. They're afraid to lead. They're afraid to tell people when they're wrong. The wrong and right has become convoluted. People don't see the gray area in between anymore. But I was lucky enough where we had enough older guys who were doing the right things, like yourself, Rob Jones, Joffrey Boyd. I mean, I can keep naming guys that were killing it, doing what you're supposed to do. Yep. And they were great examples for me of, yes, if I follow their path, and, I always go back to scripture because even at that time, I was trying to figure out, I grew up Catholic, but I was visiting every church, from Jehovah's Witness to African Methodist to Baptist to Presbyterian. I visited everybody. Proverbs 13:2, really shapes you and tells you, if you follow fools, you're going to be a fool. If you follow wise men, you're going to be a wise man. And, that's kind of shaped me where, yes, I want to follow them. I want to get out just like they are. Yeah. I want to go to the greatest university I can go to because I know that's going to lead me on a path to be successful. Yeah, that's incredible, Brian. It's funny. You and I have a deep sense of faith. Our parents, my parents raised me as a follower of Jesus Christ. I had no idea you were doing the same thing, seeking during that time. No idea. That's pretty cool. So my takeaway there is there was a fundamental value structure inside you. You noticed things that you didn't want. You had this deep sense of faith. You had the deep sense of perseverance. That's remarkable, man. The other piece I want to touch on is you talked about being a good person. One of the things that I talk a lot about in these series and in my blogs is it's almost like in today's popular culture, there's an attack on men. It's almost like it's bad or it's not a good thing to talk about leadership, strong males, good values in men, et cetera. Could you talk about how your perspective on that as a football coach today? Right. Leadership is so important, and the greatest thing you can do as a leader is to be a servant leader. And I truly believe that you have to model exactly what you want your followers to do. And that means you need to be getting down in the trenches with them. You need to be showing them the proper way. You need to have the highest character, the highest integrity, and the highest faith that in you, in order to be able to show that vision to them so they can follow it. And that's missing today a lot in a lot of places. It's missing at every level. Because again, there is an attack on strong male leadership. It's you're seen as being an angry guy or angry person, and that's not always the case, as we know. So the most important part of that is, again, your character. So how do you treat everybody around you? And it goes back to, again, being a good person, and having great communication skills with everybody. You have to be able to communicate with every group of person, no matter their socioeconomic status. And that's how I see it. A lot of people are like, well, how do you coach a school full of 99% African Americans? How do you coach that at that school when you're white? Well, it's all about being a great leader and again, knowing how to communicate with people, how to show them that, hey, I don't care what color you are. I don't care what socioeconomic class you are. The only thing that matters to me is your character and your integrity. That's it. And when you show people that, they're more willing to follow you and more willing to take your advice.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Let's poke on that a little bit, Brian. The word leadership gets tossed around a lot. I love your perspective on servant leadership. I totally agree. You and I were both coached by Coach David Dempsey. I did my first podcast was with Coach Dempsey, and that was one of the key principles he always taught: leadership. Today, it's almost like leadership on social media, what we're showing young kids, et cetera, is you have to be out there. You have to put your opinion and perspective out there. Where when you and I grew up, leaders took action to help others, serve others, and to improve certainly our lives. Our coach, you are coaching, you're teaching, you're mentoring, you're basically stewarding at a school that's 99% African American in South Carolina. One of the issues that I discussed last week on a podcast that's going to be released soon, the fire department, the chief of fire, Steve Archer and Lynn, one of the issues we discussed was the absence of males in the home. He mentioned that in African-American homes, over 80% the fathers are absent. In Hispanic homes, I mentioned that over 60% of those homes, there's no father. Can you talk about that, Brian? I mean, we talk about leadership, but you've got to start in the home. All these values start in the home. You grew up in I'm going to call it a non-traditional home, like a lot of these kids today. How did you develop this character, the grit, the values in a home that was essentially, quote unquote, non-traditional? How did that happen, Brian? And what lessons can folks listening learn from you through that?
Great question. So you have to be willing to listen to others. And like you mentioned, Coach Dave Dempsey, and there's a quote, you got to build a bridge to leadership through discipline. That's the only way through it. You can't cross leadership without discipline. And when you have, and there's, this isn't a knock on females or anything like that, but discipline usually comes from a male figure for males. So you have to have males in your life that can lead you on that path of discipline, because without discipline, my character, my integrity, everything breaks down and breaks apart.
Yeah.
So Coach Dave Dempsey was a huge part of building my discipline. My grandfather, as you know,
Yes.
taught me a lot about discipline. He
Yes.
had me to every practice, every game, an hour early.
Yep.
And that's, rare
Yep.
for a lot of people. And a lot of people these days struggle with that key aspect of, I need to be 5 minutes early or else I'm late.
Yep.
And I've always taken that as my mantra that, I want to be early to everything. I don't ever want to be the last person in the room.
Yep.
And then going to the Citadel also, helped build my leadership laboratory where I learned good leadership and bad leadership.
Yep.
I learned how not to lead and how to lead from a lot of people at the Citadel as well. Being one of the top military colleges in the country. So you learn a lot from watching other people and from taking the good points from them and transferring that to your everyday life.
Yeah.
But it all starts with discipline inside, and you have to have that in order to not break down your character and your integrity.
Yeah. Discipline seems to be a bad word nowadays, but
Right.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. It's funny. Off camera when we were prepping one day, I was writing the book, and Coach Dempsey, we were talking to him about the book and interviewing him. As we were writing the chapters of the book, I asked him, do you remember when you had me do 100 up downs? I think, I forget, they're called burpees, I think nowadays. You had me do 100 up downs because a few members of the team, I won't mention their names, weren't following along, weren't listening to you. But I was the one that had to do the 100 up downs. And he said, I do remember. And I did it for one simple reason. He said, one, you were the leader. And if they weren't following the leader, they were going to pay for it. I was trying to teach them discipline. You have to adhere to what the leader's trying to advance on the field. And if you can't, you're going to pay for it. And it sounds harsh, but it actually had the right outcome, right? After the 200, right? The second time I do the hundreds, those three guys fell in line, right? There was like, man, this is crazy. And so it was a difficult way to instill it, but it worked. And so some might disagree, and to your earlier point, oh, that's toxic, that's bad, but we ended up winning that game, right? And so I appreciate your comments around discipline and around, instilling that type of grit and character and integrity in people. For men, typically that's how you and I grew up. We grew up by watching really strong men.
Right.
Brian, I want to ask you a question about your influencers. You mentioned you had great people in your life, like Coach Dempsey, you and I both, but there's a cycle to this. And you also mentioned surrounding yourself with great people earlier. Could you talk about who were the people that have truly shaped your life through this journey?
Right. I mean, I got so many people in my journey that have shaped my life to be where I'm at now. Dave Dempsey obviously is right up there at the top of the list. And then my close friends are at that top of the list too. Yourself, Robert Jones, are right at the top. George DeMoulis, another fantastic person who's done very well in life. So all those people, along with my prep school coach, John Schumann, another great disciplinarian, total role model for anybody to follow. Yeah. Man of faith, been at his job for 55 years and still going. And then when I got to college, I surrounded myself with a guy, Maurice Drayton, and Travis Stevens, two guys that are like my brothers. Our mantra is we lift as we climb. And those guys are so instrumental in helping me not only achieve athletic excellence, but academic excellence. I saw them getting after it in college. We were teammates and doing very well in the classroom. And I was like, yep, I want to do that. I want to beat them. I don't want to be like them. I want to beat them. and they're both at the top of their professions now. One in the pharmaceutical industry, and the others the special teams coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. And so again, you have to surround yourself with people who have similar goals. You have to surround your people with similar character, similar integrity, similar faith. That's so important in being able to achieve what you want to achieve in life. And it's important to give you a vision. Like, your vision is shaped by your experiences.
Yes.
So if you're only around a certain group of people, that's going to shape your vision. Your vision is going to be very limited. And you want your vision to not be limited at all. You want your vision to be able to see everything the world has to offer.
I love
and
that.
You can't do that without surrounding yourself with people who are different, but at the same time, people who have the same ideal, same character, same integrity that you have.
Yeah, I love that, Brian. It reminds me of a scripture that I put in my book from the Bible: without a vision, people perish. And I totally agree with you, right? You have to have vision. You have to have incredible people around you. Appreciate you sharing those names. It's remarkable how, your journey has been influenced and shaped very similar to mine. Strong values, good family, morals, strong faith, perseverance, grit. I love that, man. Let's talk about your career. You are a football coach, but in addition to that, you also work at a school in South Carolina, high school. Could you talk a little bit about what you do and why you do what you do?
Well, let's start with the why. I truly believe I was put here on earth to help other people achieve their visions. That's my purpose here on earth, is to help other people see their vision and achieve their vision, whatever that may be, whether it's going in the military, whether it's going on to play professional sports, whether it's going on to be a business leader. I've taught several entrepreneurial classes. I still teach one today. So at school, I'm not just a football coach. I'm the athletic director. I'm an administrator, probably the most visible person in the school.
Wow.
So it's kind of rare, as you know. I'm one of 4 Caucasians at our school, and that's a good thing. But I'm the most visible person, I would say, besides Miss Sonia Rush Harvin, who's another great influence on my life. She's a person of God. She's our assistant principal, has worked with me now, going on 8 years. And I was lucky. The place I'm at was sent from heaven. I truly believe that.
Wow.
I truly believe that. Our former AD, Miss Deborah Kills, who hired me, is still there. She's our librarian. She's been our librarian, coach, athletic director before me for 30 somewhat years. Wow. She's a person of faith, high faith, a person of God, one of the greatest people on earth, and a true leader for someone to follow. So I was lucky to have those types of people along my journey to help me along the way. And just by watching them, I'm going to be successful. Like, I could just follow them. I don't even have to lead. I could follow those two and I'll be fine in my school. But I've had such great support. But it goes back to, again, how your why are you doing this? And everybody knows my why. My why is truly just to serve other people and help them achieve their goals, whether that's, like I said, any walk of life they want to join. I'm all for that, and I'm going to do everything, and they know I'm going to do everything in my power to help them do that. And I'll go out of my way to help them, as long as, and again, there's always a caveat: you cannot give someone free will without certain parameters. As long as they're willing to listen and willing to follow the path. The second they stray from the path, that's when I pull back and say, whoa, hey, good luck. I've tried. And a lot of people have a problem doing that these days. They hold on to some things too long. I'm at, and it's a great part of leadership that I learned from a lot of great leaders is you got to know when to cut some things off because it's going to affect what you're trying to do.
Yes.
You cannot be everywhere all the time. So you don't want to waste time.
Yep.
And, a lot of people don't see that type of vision all the time, but great leaders do. You cannot waste your time. That's a key aspect of being a great leader. Do not waste time. So you want to make sure that when you're doing things that, again, people are following the exact steps you give them and they're listening to you. Yep. And, willing to put that vision to work, take it. Do they have action? Yep. Are they going to wake up? If it's an athlete, I tell them all the time, if you want to be an athlete, wake up 6 o'clock in the morning like I did.
Yeah.
I would run Barry Park 2 miles around the park every morning at 6 a.m. I'd go into the park after I was done with my 2-mile run and do my sprint work. Yeah. Then I would go home. I would pump out 100 push-ups, take a shower, and go to school.
Yeah.
So that's a path. And if you're willing and your goal is, hey, I want to play college football, that's what you got to do because there's someone else out there probably doing more. And I tell them that all the time. I tell my guys that all the time. Someone is always doing more than even what I did. Yeah. I know my path was successful, so I'm going to give you my path. But if you beat that, you'll be extra successful. So, that's very important for them to see. But again, you got to make sure that when you're helping people, and I love to help people, that's my main focus in life is helping people, especially people I know who can never do anything for me. That's the key of great leadership is what do you do for people who cannot do anything for you?
Yep.
And you got to realize though, at some point, if they're not following along your path, it's time, time to move back. But thankfully, I haven't had too many of those. But we have had several successful stories and have really put a lot of power into a lot of people's lives. And I'm so proud of that fact, way more than any win that I had, any championship that I had is now I'm at the point where guys are coming back from getting their college degrees and saying, Coach, I appreciate you so much. Wow. Coach, you saved my life. Coach, I love you. And that means a lot,
Powerful.
And that's the key, that love is another key part of leadership. You must love your people. And that's everyone. And God taught us that. Love everyone as your neighbor. Love your neighbor as yourself. That means you love everybody. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic status, doesn't matter what color they are. You love everybody.
Yep.
And that also means you love them even when they hurt you. There's kind of I know there's going to come a point when my own son might hurt me at some time, and hurt your feelings. Yep. But you still got to love them. So, but you still got to, again, you tell them right from wrong.
Yeah.
And that's where, again, you can go so deep into that. Society is missing the point that, some of society has taken love in the wrong way and they're blurring the lines of right and wrong. You can't do that. You still got to tell them, hey, that's wrong.
And I totally agree. Agree. It is. I'm with you. It's clear, right? There's a right and there's a wrong, but that also comes from Judeo-Christian values, right? And I love what you said. When Jesus was pressed hard on what the top 2 commandments were, he made it very simple. Love God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, you said it very beautifully, Brian. I want to ask you now about your family. You and I have been passionate about our careers. Thus far, we've had remarkable journeys in our professional lives. let's talk about your family. You have a beautiful family. Talk to me about that.
Right. Well, I've been married to my wife, Lucy, now for 15 years. And, she's my heart and soul. When we married the traditional way. We're one now. We're one family, one person.
Yep.
We merged together, and, I spend the majority of my time with her and my son, John Wilder. And that's important to me, that I put everything into perspective, but my family always comes first.
Mm-hmm.
They're always first, like no matter what. I gotta keep that in mind. I always try to spend every moment that I have with them, outside of school and sports. Yeah. And that's important. It's important that, and my wife is fantastic. I couldn't ask for a better partner in life because she loves sports herself. So, it was a match made in heaven that I was able to find her. And, I'm just grateful for it that, we have such similarities. We'll sit and watch basketball games together on the TV. We'll watch football games together. We travel. Even when we travel, she's a huge Duke basketball fan. So I've become a Duke basketball fan. Growing up, I didn't like Duke too much. I was a Michigan basketball guy, and kind of hated Duke because they beat Michigan that year in the Final Four. But she's converted me to a Dookie, and then we go to the Duke games, and we love being together as a family and being with our son. He's such a great young man that we hope to instill our values in him, that, hopefully he'll follow our path. She's an educator as well. Has done very well for herself with a master's degree in education too. So it's just a God blessing that your family is that way, because, you knew how I grew up. My family was not that way. Yep. So, and again, it goes back to, how do you make yourself better every day?
Yeah.
I'm always trying to make myself better every day. Even now, I'm trying to be a better person each day. I wake up. The first thing I do every morning is I open up my phone while I'm drinking my coffee at the table, and I look at my 2 Bible apps, and I'll read a verse from each. And that sets my day. That sets my tone. That helps me keep myself in focus. And then I can go about my daily task. And then also, like I said, it helps me keep in mind, hey, make sure you check on your family. Don't forget about them.
Yep. All right. I'm going to go a little tough here. A couple tough questions. Because as a father, I'm going through this, like I'm sure you are. So popular culture in America today is telling our sons that if your skin color is light or white, you're privileged. And if your skin color is dark, they deserve more than you do. How do you negotiate? How do you discuss? How do you have those conversations at home with John Wilder?
Right. Well, again, it goes back to your experiences and how you relate those to your children. I bring my son to my school. I bring him to my practices, when I visit players, when I visit their families, when I visit their churches, I bring him with me. And that builds his experiences up to see the world and to see everything around him, so he can make judgments on what is right and what is wrong. And then I tell him, this is what's right and wrong.
Yep.
And I explain to him, yes, there are people who are less fortunate than us. That is a fact. There are people way less fortunate than us. That's a fact. At the same time, your goal is to, again, like me, your goal is to love everybody. Doesn't matter socioeconomic class, doesn't matter race. That's your only goal. You do not need to feel sad about it. You don't need to feel less of a person about it, because you're doing the right thing. You're doing what you're supposed to do, which is to love everybody.
That's right.
So you can't go by, and that's why we're so into our son's life, where we're bringing him to all these different events to get him experiences that he wouldn't have, because we've now climbed what they call the social ladder. We're now, upper middle class people, where I realized that. So my neighborhood's not not real diverse. It's not. But that's why it's important that he gets out and he sees these other areas, he sees these other people, and he can relate to them and communicate with them and understand why certain people feel that they're not privileged, understand why they're saying these things, and then also to be able to make his own judgments on whether that's right or wrong.
Love that.
And that's important.
Love that.
It's so important for you to give them experiences that they're not used to.
Brian,
but at the same time,
go ahead.
At the same time, you want to make sure that, again, he realizes that just because he's white does not mean that he's privileged. That that's true. That just because he's white doesn't mean he's privileged. But at the same time, he has an obligation to the world to love everybody.
No question. Yeah, it's funny, Brian. So you and I are working through this with our sons, right? And what's interesting about your comments is it wasn't until I got to college that I started gaining perspective. If you remember, back when we were in high school, there was all this talk and rap music, and in some parts of our neighborhoods, white people this and white people that. And the irony was, like, you had Brian and Pat and a few other white guys with us who were low income, but you weren't really one of the white guys. Right? So it was just weird, right? Then I get to Bowdoin College. And I realized that it wasn't about skin color. It was about income. It was all class. I mean, the kids from Northern Maine, Tennessee, Greenville, the kids from Western Mass, who were all working class, low-income white kids, they had the same issues I had. And so my head exploded. But to your point, there's two pieces here, at least. The first one is you got to have perspective. You have to understand what someone else's situation is. You got to start looking in the mirror and say, well, time out. What am I talking about? Is it really about me and my skin color? Or is it about my ability to understand the other person's situation, have empathy, have perspective, understand what they went through, and understand that they're humans just like me, right? And then number two, you're giving John Wilder exposure to understand and to learn about people, about their circumstances, and what's possible, what's not, what he might want, what he might not want. And I love that, because it's another piece in my life, in my book, in my development, about exposure. Early on, you don't know this about me in my junior high days and early high school, but I started venturing out of the low income area where I live up into Pine Hill. Pine Hill at the time, if you remember, was very nice.
Right.
And I remember people were looking at us like, we were like, what are you guys doing here?
What are you doing here?
But the point
we got kicked out of Pine Hill many a time.
Yeah, right. So the point is, you have to have perspective and understanding and learn what's what. What do I want for me? As Coach Dempsey used to say to me, if you can't see it, you can't be it. All right. And so I love the discussion about John Wilder and how you're raising him, because at the end of the day, from my point of view, it has nothing to do with skin color. I come from a multiracial family. Most of us are thriving, but we're a microcosm of what's happening in America. Some of us made some really terrible choices, and guess what? They're still there. They're still living in Section 8 housing, and that's, hey, God bless you. I didn't want that for my life. I wanted better. And I wanted to say, well, time out. If they're doing that, when I was in college, I went to Atlanta, and it was the first time I saw so many successful Black people. And I was like, wait, they can do that. I want that too. Right. And so perspective is so important. Teaching people, exposing people to all ends of the world, all spectrums of income is powerful. And hopefully John Wilder and my sons have the understanding to say, okay, what do I want? What makes sense? What doesn't? Because at the end of the day, it has to come from here. It has to come from your heart. For me, it comes down to three simple things: my faith, exposing my children to my family's core values, and hard work, grit, what I call grit. So I appreciate the conversation about John Wilder and your family, because I'm with you. I understand America's history better than anybody. I understand Puerto Rican history better than anybody, which, by the way, is terrible, right, in terms of socialism, right, whatever. But it never prevented David Morales from succeeding and breaking down doors in Boston, Massachusetts in the late 90s when doors were closed to me. I didn't care. My perspective was, well, you don't want me there, I'm going to create my own table. Well, you don't want to open that door, I'm going to go through the back door. And that's how I still think about life. I think about the America as the greatest country on the planet. And if you place limits on me, that's fine. But understand, you're going to see me at some point at the same table you're sitting. I'm going to earn my way there. So I love the conversation about John Wilder, because I respect you, I admire you, I encourage you to keep doing that. The more exposure, the more tenacity, the more understanding about the world, the better.
Right. And like you said, it's that two parts: empathy and exposure.
No question.
Yeah. There's no question about it, because you have to have some empathy towards others, where you do understand that, yes, something's gone on here that's not right. And then the exposure part of it, like, okay, here's your situation, here's their situation. Why do you think that happened? What's going on here? All that comes into play. And, we need more stories out there for lower income class kids, because I assure you, I'm an educator right now. Hope, the future, everything is at risk right now in our schools, because of there's no belief in that you can climb the socioeconomic ladder anymore for a lot of kids, especially minorities, especially ethnic groups like yourself, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, etc. I'm not leaving anybody out, but there's a huge gap right now of belief that you can make it out. So seeing positive role models, guys who have done it, and teaching those ways, because like you said, positive male role models are the key. Whether we believe that or not, I truly believe it. I truly believe positive, and we have to have, like I said, more guys like yourself, more positive minority role models out there preaching this every day, that, hey, here's my path, take it. Here's my path, take it. And we need those around our kids often, because there's too many, and I don't know what's happened in American society the past 40 years since I've been alive, but you see it. Even the white family structure has broken down. There's a lot of divorced white families now too, where, again, a lot of white children are going down the wrong path as well. And I see that every daily. And, I talk to 40 principals I'm in class with all the time. And some of those are in predominantly white areas where crime and stuff has taken over because of the family structures are broken. There's no more family structures around, and that's because there's no more positive role models around. And as fathers, I think the greatest thing I saw in the past 2 months, there was a group of dads who got together, I believe it was in Mississippi, and decided to go to school and to create a new culture at that school where they weren't going to allow all the stuff to go on, and that was powerful. We need more dads stepping up. We need dads to stay in their families. and to create these groups of powerful leadership. Not to say that women can't do it, but it takes two.
There's no question. Yeah, I agree, Brian. And it's funny you're raising these points. There is almost I was having this conversation yesterday with someone I won't mention because they're going to get on one of these podcasts too. But they asked me that question, like, hey, what do you think has happened? And I said, look, I'm not an expert, but I can tell you from my point of view, there's several pieces that I'll tell you right now. The first one is we have lost, when we took Christ out of the schools, that's hurt us. When we stopped teaching patriotism, pride in American values, that's hurt us. And when we took the fathers out of the home, starting with the social welfare experiments of the 1960s, welfare, public housing, that's hurt our homes too, right? Because fatherless families become rudderless families, like boats, they'll get lost, right? And then finally, I said, there is a perspective now where strong men are called toxic males. And I reject those concepts, right? I grew up watching a father work many jobs who was a defender of the family. And I'm talking about physically taking on people who mess with his family. I watched my grandfather serve as such an incredible role model for our family. Tough as nails, World War II, et cetera. I watched, even in Lynn, right? I watched some of my brothers who were much older than me, the Morales brothers. You didn't mess with those guys, right? And so from my point of view, there's all these elements that today we're heading down this path where social media, where popular culture is saying, look, all these other things are better than this, right? Than a strong man. You can be a cat and identify as a cat. Well, I disagree. And right. And for me, that all comes from those pieces. If you don't have Christ in the schools, if you're not teaching values, if you don't have a strong family structure, if you're not supporting men in the family as a good foundational pillar, if you're not advancing character, tenacity, grit, et cetera, and if you're not embracing American values and patriotism, look, at some point, the house is going to break. And so for me, all those factors have come together to really impact how our young kids are perceiving their future. I tell everybody, my wife and I are launching, Samantha, are launching out Inc., financial coaching and financial wellness. At the end of the day, if you look at the data in America, over time, every family has done better. Most families have done better generationally. But there's this discourse about, hey, you're poor. It's because, the country's a problem and it's racist. And I just disagree. The data doesn't support that. Generally and typically, most families, especially those who persevere and fight hard, do better financially. So the future is bright, so long as you have incredible values like faith, family, perseverance, good education, tenacity, and to your earlier point, the will to do better. The future's bright. The future is not bright, though, if you're going to sit at home, play on your computer, complain about your country, complain about others, when you're not looking in the mirror to do something about it. Yeah. Brian, I want to ask you a couple questions before we wrap. One is, what would Coach Brian Smith say to a group of high school students in Lynn, Massachusetts, at Lynn Classical, or at any urban school or rural school in America? What would he do? What would he say to those kids if he were in a big auditorium? What would be his message?
My message would start with the 3 P's of life. And I tell my guys this all the time. I tell anybody that wants to listen, I live by 3 P's. First one is pride. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of where you're from.
Yeah.
And be prideful in everything you do.
Yeah.
If you can say that to yourself, I'm prideful in everything I do.
Yeah.
You're on the right path. Second P, passion. Like you said, that grit, that tenacity, that determination,
all that goes together. Passion is what you need in any walk of life.
Yes.
You gotta be passionate about what you're doing.
Yes.
So if I'm passionate about playing football, I'm going to be successful at it. If I'm passionate about sweeping a floor, I'm going to be successful at it. If I'm passionate about being a good father, I'm going to be successful with it. So that passion is so key. And again, that's that grit, that tenacity, that determination. And no matter what, no one's going to take this from me.
Yep.
And then the final P is poise. You have to be able to understand circumstances, understand events that happen in your life, and you have to have poise under pressure.
Yes.
Like, you cannot just fly off the handle in certain situations that ruin everything you built your life up for.
Yep.
So that poise is key. That poise means when I'm in a situation and I'm a teenage kid and it's 12 o'clock at night and my friends say, hey, let's go over to Sally's house. Sally's mom's not home. You know, don't worry, it's going to be okay.
Yep.
Poise is like, whoa, hold on, let me think about this a second. Yeah, nah, you know what? I'm just going to go home.
Yep.
Or, hey, here's a drink, man. Why don't you drink this? As you know, I never drank in high school. I used to bring chocolate milk to parties. People would make fun of me. I brought a chocolate milk to parties. And that poise, like, you got to be able to feel the pressure and be like, hey, you know, this pressure, I could feel it, but I'm not going to let it break me. I got poise.
Exactly.
No different than if you're on a field of play and it's, you know, 3rd down and 10 and they're blitzing and you got to get a first down. That's that poise. You gotta have poise no matter what you do in any walk of life. That's so important. So those 3 P's are what I would preach to them first. Secondly, if you can believe it, you can achieve it.
That's right.
I'm a true believer in that. So no matter what you're dreaming about, you can achieve those dreams.
Yes.
With hard work and tenacity.
Totally agree, man. Totally agree.
Hard work pays off.
Period. Totally agree. Yep.
So no matter what the outside world's telling you, no matter what anybody's telling you, like you said, I can kick down the back door, I can kick down the front door, I can kick down the side door. There's a million different ways, but as long as you're in where you want to be, that's all that counts. It doesn't matter how you got in.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, Brian. You know, you talked about competing earlier, right? For the kids you coach, et cetera. One of the things I'm telling my kids is you need to compete against yourself every day. I don't care what the other kids are doing. I don't care what LeBron James is doing. I don't care what Patrick Mahomes is doing. You need to compete against yourself. Wake up every day, look in the mirror and say, am I better today than I was yesterday? Every day. And if you can say that, you're doing better. Right? But do not assume that you're competing against someone else. Doesn't matter what they have. You're going to compete against yourself. Every day you must be better. So I love your message.
That's key. You know, and I tell my guys that all the time. Never be envious of somebody else or jealous of somebody else. Focus on yourself. If you're a great leader, you focus on your inner self and you make sure you are getting better each day. If you accomplish that and you know every day I'm getting better, it doesn't matter what the other person does. You're gonna eventually either surpass these other people that you would be comparing yourselves to, which you shouldn't, and you're gonna be successful.
Totally agree. Hey, Brian,
you're gonna be successful.
Last question. We talked about your purpose earlier, so I love that. I'm gonna change it a little because I typically end with what's your purpose, but you covered that. It's to serve others, and I love that, by the way. The final question I'm going to ask you is, how does Coach Brian Smith want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as somebody who helped bridge the gap of love, you know, and bridge the gap of servant leadership. A guy that went out of his way to help all people.
Yeah.
And doesn't matter what color, again, what race, what socioeconomic status. I want to be remembered as someone who loved everyone and loved his family and taught the world and left the world a better place. Because I know that time's coming.
Yep.
Left the world a better place for the world to be able to better understand people.
Yep.
Because I think that's missing in our world today. There's a lot of people who don't understand people. There's a lot of, and I hate to see it, there's a lot of hatred in the world right now. A lot of people hate themselves.
Yes.
And they just throw that hatred on the others. That's why, I don't get into politics anymore, because there's so much hatred on all sides. That's got to change. We got to change that one person at a time. We got to change that groups at a time.
Yes.
That hatred, or else we're going to end up ruining this world that we live in for our children, because there's so much hatred right now, and it hurts my heart because I didn't grow up that way. Yep. And I can't, that's one thing I can't understand, why someone would hate someone just because of the color of their skin or their ethnic group. And my grandfather, used to tell me stories, back in the day when Irish people were treated that way.
Yep.
Obviously, again, American history tells you there's been groups throughout times that were treated that way. But it especially hurts my heart, being at a school with 99% African Americans, where I could tell the world right now, we're at a point where a lot of African American children are growing up feeling hated.
Yep.
And that's our job to change that. Like, it's our job to show them love. It's our job to show them that, hey, no, there are people out there that do hate you. Make no mistake about that. But we're not like that. Don't put everybody into that group.
Yep.
We're not like that. That's not what God intended. That's a mistake of this world that we're going to fix. And believe me, we will fix it. And I'm going to die trying to fix that problem, because I know it's a huge problem right now. I see it every day. And that hurts my heart. I go to sleep at night, and it hurts my heart that there's people out there who feel unloved. And we need to change that. We need to change that in all groups. And I'm sure if I was at a predominantly Hispanic school, like schools in Lynn now, or a predominantly Jamaican African school in Brooklyn, that it would feel the same right now. Or like you said, sometimes in a lower income class white neighborhood, it might feel the same too, where they just don't feel loved anymore. And that hurts me, because we were not put on this earth to feel unloved. God wanted us to feel everybody's love. Yeah. And we need to make sure that that's what our life is about, is spreading that love, letting people know that, hey, no matter what you're seeing on the media, no matter what you're seeing here and there, and I'm not one of these fake media news guys. I respect the media. I respect their profession as well. I don't get into fake news media and all that garbage. I respect those people as well. I love those people. A lot of them do a fantastic job too. But it's all about love, and how are we going to leave this earth when we leave? Are people going to remember that we loved everybody? Yeah. I appreciate that, Coach. I'll also add to your wrap up, because I love it. I totally agree with you. I think a lot of people feel unloved. I think a lot of people are, for whatever reason, there's this culture of division where every ethnic group, racial group in America is being told, oh, you divide, you matter, they don't, you matter, they don't. And that's not what the Bible teaches us. That's not what Jesus Christ taught. And at the end of the day, I agree wholeheartedly with you. There is a deep-seated passion in each of us, you and I, as we're talking through this, to serve other people, to show them that there's an alternative path, that there is a long-term journey in this life that we take to help others improve their lot. And to ultimately, from my point of view, salvation, right? I know at the end of the day, Christ has a better place for me after this life. So my job here on earth is to help others understand there's a better path. And so I appreciate your comments.
Look, this has been an incredible conversation. Clearly, we need to have another one. Coach, before we go, any final thoughts?
You know, I tell everybody, I wear my Citadel ring everywhere I go, and it's not because I'm bragging that I went to the Citadel or none of that. It's because what's written inside of it. If I was to pull it off, you would see that Psalms 23 is written inside of it.
Yes.
And that's it. Powerful for everybody is, you know, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. Like, no matter what situation I'm in, I know I can get out of it. I can persevere. I can shine through it, because I know my purpose and I know that God will be there for me.
Yep.
And I've seen that so many times in my life. And I'll just leave with one great story. And it's a story where I knew there was a God in life. And it's a great story because it shows you the greatness of our world and the greatness of our country too. It was when Antoine Walker passed away, and, you know, he was like a brother to me, lived with us. We, you know, knew each other from birth.
Yep.
And I was at Fork Union, and I took a train from Richmond, Virginia, down to Jessup, Georgia. Never been to Jessup, Georgia in my life. I got to the train station, and my brother and Neil and his family were supposed to be waiting on me. And I sat down, and there was a Mexican girl there with her baby. And being the nice person that I am, and that I was and still am, I started a conversation with her. Hey, how you doing? You know, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, you know, just, you know, coming down here for a funeral. You know, I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable. I was sitting next to her. That was the only bench in the little train station that I was at. So an hour goes by, neither one of us are picked up, and I'm starting to worry. It's getting dark outside. I've never been to Jessup, Georgia in my life. And it's small town Georgia, southern Georgia. I'm like, oh boy, I got my little military jacket on from Fork Union military, and I'm starting to worry, like, uh-oh. And I couldn't get in touch with any of the people I was trying to get to pick me up. So her mom comes and picks her up, and she just looks at me and's like, sir, do you need a ride? And I said, well, I'm going to Douglas, Georgia, Coffee County. I said, I got the address, but you know, I'd hate to put you out of your way. And she says, no, we want to do this for you.
Wow.
And at first, you know, you're like kind of hesitant, like, okay, well, you know, I don't know. And then I'm like, well, I don't have another choice. There's no other alternative. It's been over an hour now. No one's picked me up. I don't think they're coming. Yeah. So there must be a mistake somewhere. Those people drove me all the way to the doorstep of Antoine's grandmother's house, where we were all being taken in for that weekend.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that. Like, they didn't have to do that. Like, and that showed me at that time, like, and it made me go all in. Like, there is a God, man, because God was there that day. I promise you. I felt it. I felt it in my inner being. I felt it in their presence. You could tell they were a family of faith. You could tell that they didn't care that I was white and they were Mexican. They didn't care that, you know, I was this big, you know, I'm 220-pound linebacker dude. I probably look a little bit intimidating to them. They didn't care about all that. They just wanted to help somebody in need. And those kind of stories are rare these days of helping people in need. And we need to get back to that. But I tell everybody that story. How do you know there's a God? Here's a prime example. I said, you know, definitely a God, because without that, I would have been sitting in a train station. I found out when I got to the place, my brother and them thought I was coming the next day. So I would have had to stay overnight at the train station,
or else, I wouldn't have been picked up.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing story that these people, and they were actually going, they told me, I said, well, by the way, where are y'all going? And they said, well, we live about an hour from there. So they went an hour out of their way to drop me off.
Wow. It's incredible.
Not knowing me at all.
I didn't know you, yeah.
Never seen me, never heard of me, nothing. But I guess, again, by me communicating with them, they probably saw that, again, good people know good people. And I say that all the time. Good people know good people. So when you treat people right, good things happen to you.
There's no question.
And that was the first thing I did before I sat down, is I introduced myself, and I made sure she felt comfortable that I was sitting there, that I wasn't a threat.
Yeah.
And that's something powerful that more people need to be able to do, that
Yes.
that aren't doing like they should anymore, is communication. Communication is the key. You have to be able to communicate with all groups of people, and not sit there and not communicate with people. It's so powerful to just communicate with everybody that you see.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, Brian, that is an incredible story. So many lessons from it, by the way, from how you engage them, to God's presence, the discussions on faith, and to, frankly, their heart, right? God touched their heart to say, we got this. Coach, I am just blown away by the conversation. I am blessed to have you in my life, and I'm just grateful that you spent so much time with me this morning. Thank you. Seriously, thank you for doing this.
Yes, it was a pleasure being here. I love you guys to death. And Grit Machine, I know, is that DNA is just different. Yeah, I mean, you got to have that DNA in you, and I'm so glad this story's getting out there. I'm glad that you're able to tell your story to the world, because it's so powerful to see that here you are, a guy of Puerto Rican descent from the island of Puerto Rico, by the way, not born here in the United States, came here, achieved everything in the world there is to achieve, and still going on to greater things, and nothing held you back.
Yeah.
Not a thing.
No question, man.
And that's because of who you are, your character, your integrity.
Everybody truly shines through. And I mean, it's just a remarkable story that you were able to help others as well, like myself, see a path out. Like, hey, I want to be Dave Morales when I grow up. He's going to Bowdoin. If I can do that, I know I can do what I want to do. If he's able to go to Bowdoin, a predominantly white school at the time, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And still might be predominantly white. They didn't have too many Puerto Ricans walking around campus.
Less than 10.
So, that was powerful. And we also had a guy, bless his soul, and man, so many of our guys have passed away, but Abel Marquez was supposed to go to Bowdoin as well.
Yes.
And I remember that very vividly, thinking to myself, man, and that one night took away his dream. I got to make sure that doesn't happen to me.
That's right. Taught me the same lesson.
I got to make sure that doesn't happen to me. Again, that poise, like, hey, all right, hey, we're all going out this night. We're going to be doing this. That poise comes into play.
Oh, man.
Bless Abel soul.
Let me tell you, Brian.
He also taught us again that academic excellence was possible for people like us. That it didn't matter how poor you were, you could still achieve academic excellence, because our first couple of years at Classical back in the late 80s and 90s, the people of our economic status were looked down upon from the people of other areas, like, hey, we're smarter than you.
Yeah.
But
St. Mary's, Bishop Fenwick.
Yeah, but we were able to flip all that
on
its head by leaders like yourself and Abel and others, and George DeMoulis and all of us. We were able to flip that whole scenario on its head and be like, hey, we're at the same table as you now. I go to the Citadel, you go to Bowdoin, George went to Bentley.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about top academic institutions in the country.
No question.
So, we were able to, kind of do away with that myth that they were better than us because of their, upbringing. And that was powerful, like you said, because I remember vividly, how we were portrayed for a while, and that whole thing comes into play. But thankfully, we had people to show us the way, and this grit DNA grit machine for sure will show people the way. I'm so proud of it,
and can't wait to see what the future holds.
Yeah, thank you, Coach. One point of clarification and then a quick note. So I was actually born in Indiana. My family went back to Puerto Rico when I was around 2 years old or 1, and I came back around 12 years old. My father had to leave the island. We were devastated. We had no money, nothing. And I tell some of this in the book, but my father, fell to alcoholism, and God saved his life on the island. And one of the pastors told him, "You need to leave. You need to go the United States and help your family." And that's what happened. My father brought us here. We moved to a triple decker, Chestnut Street. And, that whole street was pretty much brown. And that's where the journey started in America. But one thing I do want to say is to your point about Abel. So Abel Marquez passed when we were in high school. One of the things that Coach Dempsey told me, because we used to hang on Commercial Street where he lived. He lived in the little Section 8 house in the corner. And I used to hang out there at parties with him. And I asked Coach Dempsey, "Why did you ask me to wear his number?" And he told me that he had talked to the family about this other young man who was very much like Abel and, smart, works hard, really, really tenacious, blah, blah, blah. And the mother and the brother, Manny, said, "Oh, we know him. We know him. He's incredible, blah, blah." Man, I started bawling. I didn't know the story. I started bawling. And this is like a year ago, 2 years ago. I didn't know the story. But I remember feeling like I was being demoted my junior and senior year, in particular my senior year, because Coach Dempsey kept moving. If you remember, he took me off center, put me a linebacker stuff. And I started wondering, the jersey and this. And Coach Dempsey said to me right here where I'm sitting in my sermon room, he said, "David, you were my go-to guy. I wanted the other kids to see what leadership looked like. You didn't speak, you just did stuff." And it's part of that DNA that he helped to shape in you and I. I remember he used to always say, people don't have to believe what you say, they have to believe what you do. And it stuck in my head my sophomore year, and that's what I did. I'm going to do. But I'm sharing that story, Brian, because you raised Abel Marquez and tenacity and discipline, character. And those are the traits that shaped you and I. And still to this day, they shape me, and they continue to help me understand my place as a father with my 2 sons, my nieces and nephews. I want to advance the same principles, the same values. And I'm hopeful that if I touch one person with these podcasts and videos, I've done my job.
Right. And that's powerful.
Yeah. Brian, Coach, look, appreciate you, man. Love you to death. Say hi to Lucy and John Wilder. Thank you all for watching and for listening to Grit Machine DNA. For more stories to inspire you, check out our website, www.davidamorales.com. Big shout out to Coach. Brian Smith is doing incredible things in South Carolina, an incredible coach, an incredible father. Thank you, Coach, for spending so much time with me today. I'll see you soon.
Si vives día a día en un abismo de dolor y buscas solución a tus problemas, busca del Señor y sigue su camino, y pronto nacerá la paz en tu corazón. Y con la paz del Señor yo he vencido mi temor, y yo vivo victorioso por su amor. Y con la paz del Señor yo he vencido mi temor, y yo vivo victorioso por su amor. Si abismo de dolor y busca solución a tus problemas. Busca del Señor